Hello and welcome to Healing Tips from the Heart, Intuition with Helpers, Healers, and Guides. I am your host, Dr. Lori Hops, licensed psychologist, writer, and artist. I've explored mind, body, and spirit related to intuition, or your personal guidance system, since early childhood. Meet my guests who have learned from their personal and professional lives to explore vast realms of knowing, synchronicities, and overcoming challenges. Their stories may inspire you with tools to enhance your daily living and relationships. Hello, everyone, and welcome my special guest for today, Louise Fitzgerald. Louise is an intuitive, spiritual coach and mindfulness meditation teacher. She guides people to find clarity and confidence in life's big moments by inspiring them to break free from their limitations, to trust and believe in themselves, and importantly, to take action. She is host of the Louise Fitzgerald Podcast and has over 80,000 plays of her meditations on Insight Timer. And she's from Sydney, Australia, where it's tomorrow from my perspective and yesterday from hers for me. And she supports people online all over the world. And I know Louise, we've met online through the Bankston group, through the Bankston method. We're in a practice group together, which we'll be talking a little bit about. And I'm so grateful that you're here today. So welcome, Louise.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, thank you. Yes, for reaching out. And is there anything you'd like people to know beyond what I just described, a little brief bio?
No, I think that was kind of everything. Yeah, so I'm based, as you said, in the future in Sydney, Australia. So it's always really, really funny. So it's nighttime for you and morning for me. But yeah, it's kind of really cool that I can meet people from the other side of the world like you, and we can connect. And yeah, through the Bankston method, which I'm sure your listeners have heard about.
Maybe not. I have a
Oh,
couple of other
really?
podcast interviews that I have, conducted, but very happy to have you explain because we never know who's listening. And for them,
Yeah.
they're our future and we're their past. So,
Yes.
because we're recording this in September of 2024. So,
Yeah.
would you like to talk a little bit about the Bankston method and let people know what that is?
Yeah, from what I know, I'm reasonably new to it, and Bill Bankston created the method, and I went to one of his workshops where he teaches the method, which is kind of it's a really, really interesting method because you're sort of thinking about things that you want, and it can heal other people. So I was really interested in learning it because I know other energy healing modalities, and one of my mentors, Krishanti Walla, who you probably know,
Yeah.
Krishanti. Yeah, she got me onto Bankston, and I think it's a nice method because it's a lot lighter in a way in terms of being an energy healing method. So it's a good thing to incorporate into other things that you're doing.
Yeah, so he worked early on with a healer, and they were trying to figure out how do you teach this to people because the
Right.
healer sort of intuitively knew what to do.
Yeah.
So he came up with this method of rapid visual cycling of things that you really want for yourself. And in doing so, it kind of puts you out of the driver's seat and
Yes.
allows a hyper focus to come in. We're not exactly sure what happens, but somehow this state of being promotes healing. So it's
Yeah.
rather fascinating. It's sort of like the rapid visual cycling, which we practice so much, is sort of is kind of almost a distraction from the mental state or the physical or physiological or spiritual state that we want to enter.
Mm. And it does make a lot of sense in in the way that you just explained it. It's kind of getting you out of the way, but I think that focusing I find that when I go to our Bankston Healing group, I feel so much better when I leave, but it's in part because of the people in the group, positive and uplifted. And I think that in part the healing process is because we're shifting ourselves, our own energy, by focusing on those things that we want and feeling into what it would be like to have them. And so we're shifting our energy, or some people might call it, I guess, vibration, to a level that could be like the conduit for the healing. It's interesting because I guess we don't really know why it works, but when I think about it, that could be how it works, maybe.
Well, one of the things he does say is that healing finds need. So if
Yeah,
there's a need for healing, then the healing magnetically kind of attracts or attaches to it. So
yeah.
if there's, let's say, an animal that's doing quite well, it won't necessarily be interested in that energy field or that
Mm,
experience of being someone who's with someone who's in that heightened state of awareness, or whatever you want to call it. But if there's an animal maybe who's sick, they might be drawn to it
yeah,
and need it. And then when they're done there, they walk away if they can walk or crawl or fly or whatever means of
yeah.
motion they have. So
Yeah, and
yeah,
I don't know if you've got pets, but I see that with my cat. Will sometimes, when I'm doing sessions, will sometimes come in the room, and then other times won't come in the room. And I found that to be quite interesting. Like, why the choice for this person, and why, because it's,
yeah,
yeah, interesting.
beautiful. So do you, as a meditation teacher, do you see a similarity with the Bankston method and what, because a lot of people are familiar with meditating, with
Yeah.
quieting down and focusing with an intention or letting things be, but it's a mental, physical state of, well, I'll let you speak about that, but I'm interested in
Yeah.
the combination. Yeah.
I can see where you were going with what you were saying, and I think the that state, that if you can get to that state in meditation, I can't always, but when you can get to that state where it does feel like everything drops away a little bit, that can feel similar to the Bankston method. But I think that the thing that I love about the Bankston method is that I think a lot of people can imagine something that they want, and then when you really feel into it, then you can feel that shift within yourself. And I think, speaking of animals, one technique that sometimes I do as a meditation teacher, if I'm running a particular kind of meditation, is to say, think of, or a pet if you have one. The reason I don't say humans is because we often have some level of difficulty with every human in our life, and so it's hard to kind of shift our energy there. But with animals, I think we can tune into almost that heart space of feeling, that's quite elevated, and there isn't any block to tapping into that kind of expansive happiness heart space. So I guess the parallels that I would draw would be that you're in Banks, and it seems like you're moving into like a very clear heart space, and in meditation, when everything drops away, you can move into that space. And just to help people, if they're trying to imagine what I'm talking about, it's like if you do have a pet, or maybe a baby or something, and you can tune into that feeling without any worry or fear, or, yeah, if that makes sense.
So it's kind of uncomplicated love.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great way of saying it. Uncomplicated love. Yeah.
As some people feel that when they're in nature.
Yeah, that's another great one. I grew up in a lot of nature, and so I definitely think that even if people, because I live in the city now, can go for a walk and just look at the trees, look at the birds, whatever there is around them. Yeah, it's that act of tuning, not even tuning everything out, but just letting everything else go. So I suppose that is what mindfulness is, right? So we could be there, cutting a tomato and completely focusing on the tomato and allowing everything else to step back. But there is something a little bit different when we're tuning into nature or tuning into something that sort of has that, yeah, uncomplicated love, as you put it.
Yeah. And as you were saying that, I thought, well, what if there aren't trees, but there's always
Mm,
light and shadow. There's
yeah,
always air, even if it's
yeah.
polluted air. So it just getting outside and noticing how your skin feels or taking
Mm,
how your breathing changes or sound. So
mm.
we don't always get the nature
Yeah,
uh, immersion experience, but there are ways of connecting to the flow of the natural world.
yeah.
So even when you're inside, I remember being inside a lot at certain points in my life when I was taking care of people who were ill or facing something myself, or it just wasn't safe to go out, like with
Mhm.
firestorms and things, severe weather, and to just connect with a stone or with even like a piece of fruit or a vegetable, something that grows in the ground, or
Mm,
color or sound. So
yeah.
there are ways of doing it, but it's like natural, so to speak, when you're in nature. It's almost like the power of nature is so compelling that it like forces you into this other vibration.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Beautiful. So can you tell us a little bit more about your mindfulness or other meditation practices and what you see as helpful or useful about
Yeah.
that work that
I
you
mean,
do?
it's interesting because I guess the things that I would teach people to do is not always what I do for myself, which is kind of interesting, right? Because I work a lot with really busy people. So I am just trying to get them to have buy-in and do something that's realistic for them.
Mhm.
So I sort of like to shift people from, maybe waking up and opening the blinds instead of opening their phone, like tiny little shifts like that. Or when you're chopping the vegetables, just focusing in on the vegetables, right? And then when I run meditation sessions for people, I will do sort of breath meditation, very easy, accessible stuff, because I think that a lot of people think that they're failing at meditation, which you can't do, because they're like, my mind is so busy and all of those kinds of things, but it's impossible to clear the mind. So I'm very much working at a base level with people so that they can, yeah, have that buy-in and they're not afraid of meditation.
Mhm.
For myself, it's a different story because before I ever do an intuitive session with someone, again, my mentor Krishanti, she taught me these techniques to get into this space where it's sort of beyond just clearing the mind, but it's kind of moving myself into healer mode, because I know a lot of people, a lot of mediums, for example. I don't call myself a medium, but they're quote unquote always on,
Ah,
and I definitely like to create a shift between being a normal human and then being in that space, because I otherwise I think would just be picking up on things all the time from people, and I think I would be quite exhausted.
I see. So thank you for that distinction. I think it's really important. And what kinds of things do you engage in when you do go into that special work mode, so to speak, where your
Yeah,
your uh,
meaning,
your sign goes to from closed to open?
yeah, it is funny because I one of the things that I do is like imagining like switches turning on. So it's funny you should say that.
Yeah.
Um, Meaning, what kind of work do I do with people when I'm
Yeah.
in the mode? Yeah, I mean, people come to me for lots of different things, and we're all human, so we all have sort of goals and things that we want, right? And so a lot of the time people come to me with that. They want to meet someone, or they want a deeper relationship with their partner, or I've got a lot of fertility clients as well. And so I've trained in so many different little things that I can kind of apply depending on the person in front of me. So, for example, I can do a health scan, which someone in general just might want that. Or in the case of fertility, that's where I can do a health scan and see if there's anything we need to be aware of, or if there's anything in their diet that they need to shift. And I know today you wanted to chat about remote viewing, and that's kind of tied into this, so I can kind of divert and come
Sure.
back. Yeah, so I know we were talking about remote viewing because it's a term that I'm calling remote viewing. In our Bankston group, someone had lost their optical glasses, and I had been taught how to find missing things, and so I was able to help them find their glasses. And funnily enough, it was 2 days ago someone else lost their glasses in a Facebook group I was in, and I was able to find them. So I don't know why I'm finding all these glasses at the moment. Um, but I guess to rewind a little bit for the listeners, so um, yeah, someone can have a missing item, and initially I did this training to just learn, it's called forensic mediumship. It was to help if there's missing people or those kinds of things. But the technique is that you're sort of traveling to where the item is in your
Mhm.
mind's eye, and you're just describing what's in the area. So you would say, oh, I can see something that's white and smooth, or I can see a lot of green, or I can see maybe there looks like I try not to interpret what that information is, if that makes sense. So I wouldn't say, oh, I can see a drink bottle. Sometimes I do, but I really try and just keep it blank, because then that person can say, oh, I think I know where you're describing. And so the interesting thing about that is, with remote viewing, yes, I can find missing items, but say I'm scanning someone's body, I'm technically traveling to the location. So
Mhm.
I'm traveling to, say, the reproductive area, and looking and seeing what can I see.
Mhm.
And so that's how I would apply it in a session. I hope that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Thank you for that. Because we obviously don't have a live audience with Q&A. But
Yeah.
if people want more information, of course, in the
Yeah.
program notes, they'll have all the information, they can contact you. But I'm starting to think about several different things. One of them was about time. So
Mhm.
I might be able to, let's say, locate where my necklace is usually, but
Yes.
you're saying you have to not just know where is it usually, but where is it right now because it's missing.
Yes. Yes.
So there's a
Yes.
time dimension and a place dimension that you have to focus in on. It's not just one or the other, it's both.
Oh, yeah, actually, I suppose, yeah, I'm definitely not I understand what you're saying, because I I could tune into, so there's two ways of doing it, right? One way I can tune in if I tune in intuitively, I'm using the word intuitively, even though both methods are intuitive. But if I was to tune in and just get information about the necklace, um, I could see the history, maybe images come through about the history of it. So, literally, like, where do you usually place it? And so, the reason that remote viewing is so helpful in this case is because I'm looking at where it is right now,
Yeah.
and describing what's around it right now. Um, but once I did find someone's missing engagement ring, which was funny because I then combined those two things. And so then I saw images of her daughter playing with it.
Oh,
So then it was kind of like putting the pieces together of, like, okay, if this is where I can see it is right now, in combination with the story that I'm getting around it, it was in her daughter's bedroom.
oh, okay,
So
interesting.
yeah, I know what you're saying there, because you can kind of get a timeline of what has happened to get to where it might be, and then it paints this nice picture of, like, oh, okay, I think I know where that is.
Yeah, beautiful. Nice description. Thank you. Very clear. The other thing I was thinking about just before I met with you, I was listening to another podcast,
Hmm.
and it was about intuition. And they were talking about how intuition is a natural human, ability that is very practical. and interwoven with logic and other ways of knowing, and that in the world over and over time, it's just the way things are. It's neither revered nor shamed. It's just held as natural in many societies. And one of those ways is to track animals. So if you're needing animals, you eat animals for the village to survive, for people to live, then you have to use your knowledge of where are the animals moving and what
Mm.
season and what way and what's the weather doing. But another way is through remote viewing. Where are they now? But also dreams ahead of time. Where are they coming? Where are they going? And one of the things they mentioned was to not step on the animal's tracks. So let's say
Ah.
you're tracking an elk or a deer and you see the footprints in the soil or the mud or whatever, to not disturb that with your own space, with your own foot, with your own energy field. Because
Mm.
the notion is that the animal will be keen and pick up your
Ah.
signal of an interference in their journey, and they'll get a heads up, and then they'll be able to
So interesting.
evade you. So it's almost like
Yeah.
that their DNA or their energetic signature or their vibe or their invisible thread to their past
Mm.
is linked to their current. And it's almost like how we say it, like, oh, there's a disturbance in the field.
Yeah. So interesting. I think that intuition, which, modern day technology and all of these things, and we're so busy and we're so distracted, really interferes with that natural state that we do have. But when you said that, it made me really think about people that are single and dating. And I was single for quite some time, and sometimes you sort of be dating someone, and these days they just sort of, what's called ghosting, they just sort of
Mhm,
disappear, right?
mhm.
And it made me think of that when you said it, because there's something unknown that person is just like picked up on. Maybe she's on to me, or she knows who I really am, or something. It's something unknown. And I do think that humans aren't aware that they are able to do this, but there's something maybe even between two people where they think, oh, that person's not right for me, or something's throwing me off here, or all those little subtle ways. But that animal tracking thing did make me think of that, which is quite funny.
Yeah, it's interesting. And, I had never heard of, I mean, I've heard of tracking and
Yeah, I've never heard of it how you explained it.
yeah, and I know that you're not supposed to disturb the track. You're supposed to
Mm,
notice it and be near it, but not destroy it. But it's interesting how to put this together with remote viewing and intuition and getting a sense of yourself over time and space and all the rest. So yeah,
yeah.
interesting. So I'm wondering if there's any maybe like a glimpse into either the breath work or remote viewing, or maybe just that simple basic tuning into your intuition. Do you have any like tips or examples or practice that you might want to share?
For people that want to tune into it more, I
Yeah.
think with they're actually almost all intertwined, I would say, because if people wanted to tune into the intuition more, I believe we need to tune more into the body and less of the mind. And in order to do so, we do need to slow down. So then we can sort of take some breaths. And if we're taking some breaths and we're conscious of those breaths, because we're not usually conscious of the breath, we're just breathing. So if we're just sort of noticing the inhale and noticing the exhale, noticing the inhale, noticing the exhale, we're automatically coming into our body.
Mhm.
And then when the mind wanders, not if, when, we just come back again to the breath, and we start to build more of a connection in to the body, which I know sounds super simple, but we don't really do it that much. And the other reason that I would say for people to wake up and open the blinds and not pick up their phones is connected to this too, because we often wake up and then we're sort of running around and we're automatically tuning into other people instead of ourselves. So what's going on in the US election? What's going on with my friend Sally? What's going on, with everything else before we check in with ourselves? So we have these days such a disconnect with our own body and how we are feeling. We're very attuned into what's going on in the world, but not so much how we're feeling. And how this is connected to the intuition is because I believe the intuition runs so much through the human body. So that's why we say, I had a gut feeling, because it's kind of through the body. But people often initially cannot tell the difference between fear and intuition, which is really, really important, because they'll say, oh, I think I need to do this, but that could be coming from a panicked place. It could be coming from a fear place or a history of trauma or all of these kinds of things. So when we can slow down enough and tune into the body, we start to become more aware of how do I feel when I'm around this person or that person, or how do I feel when I got offered this job? Do I feel good about it or do I not feel good about it? And so then we start to, it's like fine tuning, like a tuning fork. You start to get really attuned to how you are feeling, and then the next time you're like, oh, I have that same feeling that I had when I got offered that job. It must mean that I don't want to buy this house. So you can kind of pick up on the similar things in the way that you're feeling.
Yeah,
If
beautiful.
that all makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. They are all connected, and I like how you put them together with really concrete examples. Yeah, they say that, intuition gets a bad rap because it's the loudest voice to protect you in danger situations. But if that's the only
Yeah.
way you meet it, then you're going to assume that it's always like freaking out.
Yeah, and you know what? I heard this interview the other day, a podcast interview, and it was Rich Roll. He's kind of quite big, and he had a man on there that was more of a PhD scientist than a intuitive kind of person, but he was studying the intuition. And there was one clear thing that they were talking about that I thought was really interesting, and I would define it differently, is that we have instincts. And Rich Roll is actually in recovery, right? So he has a history of drug addiction, among other things, I think. And he was saying, oh, I can't trust my intuition because when I was on drugs, it was telling me to go get more drugs. But I wouldn't actually call that the intuition. I would call that more of like an instinct, and the instinct had been overridden by that need of addiction. And then the intuition can be coming from a higher place in a way, and it is leading you for your greater good and making the decisions that are good for you, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I think that our instinct, and I mean, it's all semantics, so instinct might not be the right word, but it's that the animal part of our brains, which is connected to fight or flight, which lives in fear, isn't what I would be following. It's, we want to remove that fight or flight and that animal instinct that's just looking to protect us and step into something different. If that, I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, but
Yeah. When I teach people about how to develop their own intuition, I often use this language that Cindy Dale speaks of. I guess she created, I don't know, but she speaks of, which is the difference between like a clear channel and static. So like on the radio that you get, interference. I mean, I don't know, we don't have radio so much anymore, but it used to be that you had to tune to a station in order to get a clear channel. And if not, then there's static, which interferes with the sound quality. It's interfering frequencies. And so you want to clear those out. And so she talks about psychic static versus intuitive or psychic accuracy. And
Yes.
so in the beginning, it's hard to know the difference between them because you're just getting the loudest, biggest message, whether that's
Mm-hmm.
coming from addiction or, like you said, the animal
Yeah.
brain or trauma or other people's desires and wishes
Yes.
and
Yes.
projections and distortions and all the rest. And so
Yes.
it's like the muddy water, and you have to let it sit to get clear and separate so that you can see the
Mm.
different layers, and that takes a lot of practice. So
Yes.
I think we're kind of in the same
Yeah.
realm
Yes.
with different language,
Yes.
but yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, do you have anything else about remote viewing or meditation or intuition that you would like to share?
Yeah, so one of the things that I am trying to sort of get across and educate people around is that as humans, we have these goals and we have these things that we want, and we want our life to look a certain way. And often we're not looking at the root cause of why that thing's not happening. So, one of the things that I help people do intuitively is tap into that root cause. And to put it into sort of a plain example, someone is, wants a promotion at work, and why can't I get it? It's not happening. And they're sort of stuck in a little bit of a cycle. And then intuitively, when I can look at it, I can see that it's to do with that they're not speaking up, or they're not putting themselves forth. And so then we can dive into that. Well, what's that about? Where did that come from? And then we can look at that and understand that it has something to do with, something that happened to them in high school. Maybe they spoke in front of the class and they got laughed at. And then it's through the healing of that initial root cause that can bring that harmony back into their life as it is now. And it's the same thing even in the physical body, right? So someone might have a headache, and if you go to a sort of Western practitioner, they can say, here's a headache tablet, and that's sort of treating the symptom. But then when we look at the headache, we can look a little bit further and say, oh, it's how you're sitting at your desk. But then if we look a little bit further, then we can say, well, why are you sitting at your desk all day long? Then we can look a little bit further and realize it was something that their dad taught them about work ethic and having to work all day and don't get up for breaks. And then so when we can heal that, we can heal this headache that's created in the present moment. So I'm really interested in the way that the intuition and intuitive work can get at the root cause for people to help them understand, so we're not sort of just putting band-aids on top of things, or we're not getting stuck, or we're not able to move forward. When we can look at the past, which is scary for a lot of people, and heal it, it isn't actually that scary, and then we can bring that harmony back into our present and get to where we want to go.
Beautiful. So it's a bigger story than sometimes meets the eye.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think always. I think it's always a bigger story than meets the eye. Yeah.
Are there certain situations where you would say, no, we shouldn't do this work?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I mean, I certainly have uh, particular boundaries around things. So initially, when I started off with this work, I realized I had these abilities, and I was sort of taught or learned how to use them in certain ways, and I was making a lot more predictive outcomes for people because it's what they wanted. Um, but I don't really do that much anymore because I felt that energy is mutable, and it moves and it shifts and it changes, and so those predictions don't always end up happening.
Mhm.
And absolutely, I don't look at terminal outcomes because people want to know, is my mum okay, is my dad going to be okay? And I don't feel that that's helpful either. So in those instances, I feel like when there's anything that sits under that blanket of that person's powers being taken away, or they feel that they don't have any control over the situation that they're in, or any way that they can make a change, then I don't think it's helpful. When people are sort of leaning on intuitive work to and it makes them feel like they can't change their own path.
I see. So you don't want to take
Mm.
away their personal agency.
Yeah, I was looking for that word, but I couldn't think of what it
Yeah.
was.
It's floating in the
Exactly.
ethers between Australia
Yes.
and California.
Yeah, I was like A, and I couldn't. It was like authority. I couldn't. But agency was the word I was looking for.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, and then also to not be the prediction queen.
Yeah, yeah, because I think that the work that intuitive people can do or energy healers can do is really, really helpful for people if they're using it in that right way. If they're using it in the way to, as I said, if someone said, "Oh, am I going to get this promotion?" Well, I'm more interested in helping them understand why it's not happening so that they can make changes for the rest of their life, not just talk about this one instant that is in front of them.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you. That's great. Yeah, I really respect that. Using discernment, that it's not about here's a tool that is in every situation for every person, and to look at how is it being used and why and what's in
Mm,
their best interest, and the best use of your skill set too when your business is open. That's
yeah,
lovely.
yeah.
Wonderful. Well, we're coming to the end of our time, and so I'm wondering, is there anything else you'd like to share?
Gosh, I don't think so. No, nothing's coming to mind
Okay,
really.
very good.
Yeah.
Well, I was wondering if I could be so bold as to ask, would you like to lead a little bit of a breath exercise as we say
Yeah,
goodbye
for
for today?
sure. Yeah, so we'll do a really short one. So the listeners, they're watching as well, aren't they? And some people
Some
are watching,
depends
some
on the
people are
platform.
listening.
They might be
Yeah,
watching or just listening. Yeah.
yeah. So if you're driving, obviously don't close your eyes. But if but otherwise, you can sort of close down your eyes and otherwise keep a soft gaze at the ground in front of you or the roof above if you're laying down. And you can start by taking some conscious breaths, some deep breaths if that's possible for you. But just noticing the inhale and noticing the exhale. And you may notice that the body starts to get heavier and heavier with every breath. And if and when the mind wanders, just coming back to the breath. And I invite you to just observe the breath with curious exploration, noticing where in the body the breath is. Do you notice it in the chest? Do you notice the rise and fall of the chest? Do you notice it around the mouth or nostrils? Just narrowing your focus on where the breath is in your body. And then I invite you to expand that awareness out from the body back to the room that you're in, moving your fingers and toes, And then just coming back to the room when you're ready and opening your eyes. So I could keep going, obviously, but maybe that helps people just have a little flavor of what we were talking about earlier.
That's
about
slowing down.
Slowing down and bringing focus into one thing, attention into one thing. And so if people don't have time to meditate, or even, it's not for everyone, the sitting down and the closing the eyes, it's not for everyone, but we were talking about going for walks earlier, and you can look at the trees, if there's trees, or the colors of the houses or the colors of the cars, and make that the full focus of your walk, is just to look at the colors. And then the next day you might listen for sounds. And so we're just sort of tuning more into that one thing and bringing our attention into that one thing. And it's a very effective tool in, quieting the mind, reducing our stress and reducing our worries, because we're not thinking about the past and we're not thinking about the future. And we're not even having to think about being present. We just are doing it through activity.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for that gift. That was really, really lovely.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you for all that you're doing and bringing all these important tools out into the world. So I'm very grateful that you came and spent time with me today and with our audience.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Yeah, and if anyone wants to reach me, my website is louisefitzgerald.com.au. And if you've got any questions about anything we talked about today, feel free to shoot them through.
Wonderful. And they'll also be in the program notes.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. Okay. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's podcast. If you want to learn more, you can visit my website for podcast and resources at hopshealingtips.com. You can also like, share, and subscribe to this channel. This podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only and is not providing healthcare advice. Please seek guidance from your professional healthcare team should you need assistance.